Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're reviewing all of the books that I read in the month of June with a cat on my lap. Unfortunately, you cannot see him. Well, here. Hi! Alright. Oh, I just messed up my camera angle. Better? I don't know. I don't remember. Alright, so the first book that I finished in the month of July, 7 days into July, is Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This book is a classic. It is just under 200 pages, very short for a classic. And I am still trying to gather my thoughts on this book. The plot of this book is we have this girl and she's grown up and she's been pretty isolated her whole life in the 1800s. And her father gets really sick and her family needs money. And so she decides, she takes it into her head that she needs to be a governess to make money and then send back to her father. And no one in her family is like, you should be a governess. It's all just her. And so she's like, great, I'm going to be a governess. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And it is a coming of age story. But is it a coming of age story? Kind of. I mean, she's a governess and she has some really terrible children that she watches. And she does 2 different families where she's the governess for them. And she has a hard time with it. Like, the parents don't support her in any sort of disciplinary actions. So she's mostly just babysitting from dawn until dusk. She's a nanny, essentially, also trying to teach them school. And basically just affirmed to me that no matter what age you were as a teacher, it just sucked to be a teacher. So some of the things I liked about this novel. So first of all, the writing. I love the voice. The Brontes are very present, and by the Brontes, I mean I have read Jane Eyre and now Agnes Grey, and that's all I read of the Brontes. But the 2 books that I have read of the Brontes, their voice is very present. It's easy to read. It's very insightful. The romance in this book, also really good, but that's mostly because we don't know anything about him. So we get, like, there's a very clear distinction, and I guess we've moved on from the things that we like. There's a very clear distinction between the first part of the book and the second part of the book. The first part of the book is being a governess and how much that sucks. And the second part of the book is she's less of a governess because the kids have all grown up and she's just watching the girls. And also she's falling in love. But part of the scene at the end is one of the girls that she's watching, she likes to play with men's affection and see if she can get them to propose to her and to fall in love with her so that she can reject them. And and she does so successfully with the rector. I think it's the rector, one of the religious figures. And then his assistant, I don't know very much about the Catholic Church, so I'm not well versed in this. But his assistant comes to town, and Anne falls head over heels in love with him because he's nice. He goes and visits the sick and the elderly. He rescues someone's cat, so of course, like, hello, we love him. But we really don't see much of him before the ending scene where he proposes and says he needs someone that's not emotional. Mr. Weston, there we go. So we liked him, but we also really didn't know him. But also, did we like him, though? Because that was one of my biggest complaints about that romance, is that while he is like a good guy, he also does not seem very big on talking about emotions or how to feel about emotions. And she is highly emotional. And maybe that's just because we've seen her, she's moved out on her own, and she's like, I don't know what to do with my life. And she, like, because she says frequently, reader, I just cried. Like, I just went to my room and I had to bawl for a long time. And he is very much detached from emotions. He doesn't seem comfortable with them. And so I don't know that, like, I don't think it's going to be a bad marriage, but I think they're going to struggle a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's just a little judgmental of me. In terms of how easy it is to get through, this is a good starting novel for a classic because it's pretty approachable. But I'm not quite sure what the main theme of this is, other than that maybe it's just discussing the mundane, everyday pieces of life, which were done really well. I just don't know that I care, which sounds awful. because I do think that there is a place and a value in discussing the mundane, terrible things that a governess went through. And I know that when this book was published, everybody thought it was all lies. They're like, no, governesses don't go through this. But it was actual truth. It was based on her experiences that she had. And so I think there's definitely value in putting that out there and being like, no, this is what actually goes on in the world. But I guess I'm so far removed from that I don't care. And that makes me feel like a terrible person, because I'm sure that this is an experience that nannies today probably still experience, where they're trying to like discipline children, but the parents get in the way, and the children are spoiled brats, and the parents get in the way, and then they grow up to be spoiled brats, and then they do the same thing to their own children. So it's like this cycle of privilege and nastiness that just continues forever and ever. So I think that's important to talk about, but I don't know that this is the best jumping into it or jumping off discussion point stone for that. So I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. I don't know. I did really like the experience of reading Jane Eyre. I don't love Mr. Rochester as a romantic interest. And so this book I would say is better simply because Rochester isn't in it. I would read this again though. I give this probably 3 stars. I've heard that her other book, The Tenet of Wildfell Hall, will blow your mind, and that it's harder to read that one and then this one because she wrote this one first. So I guess I'm hoping that it gets better. I guess is what I'm hoping for. I've also, the next book in the Bronte read along, because I'm behind, but the next one is Wuthering Heights, and I've heard don't go into it expecting that it's a romance, and that it's about it's about really hateful people hating each other. So I'm really interested to know how this book takes place and what it's about, and how I've heard so many things about Wuthering Heights, and I have never read it, and I have no idea really what I'm getting myself into when I start that. So I guess we'll get there when we get there. Agnes Grey, would read it again. Don't necessarily know that I need to own it. If I wanted to read it again, I would check it out from the library. Super easy, read it in 7 days. 3 stars, maybe 2.5. It wasn't bad. And there were, like I said, the storytelling, excellent, but the plot was kind of all over and weird. Okay, and then book number 2 that I decided to wait to update you on until now is Artemis by Andy Weir. What do I say about this book? This book has made me realize how much I dislike science fiction as a genre. I don't think I like science fiction, and because this is objectively a good story. There are a lot of things here that I should like. We have Jasmine. We have this strong female character who is inventive. She is smart. She is clever. She's also a thief. She discovers a plot to overthrow the government and then gets in the way. She causes lots of problems. She's very sassy. Like, there are a lot of really good humorous moments. There are a lot of characters that felt kind of well-rounded-ish. Like, there are a lot of things here that I should like. But somehow, when all of that got mixed together in this, and then we added the element of space, I went, ew. And that's something that I know about myself, that I don't tend to like space stuff. And I don't know, like, do I like space movies? Sometimes. This is a genre that I'm very picky about. Because I do like Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. But I only read it because I trusted Brandon Sanderson to fulfill on his promises. And this one, I got so lost so much of the time. I guess part of it too is that I don't like being in the middle of a book and having new space terms or chemistry terms being thrown at me that I'm like, why does this matter? If we have to stop the entire plot to explain why this matters right now, I feel like you've done your job wrong. But I don't think that's necessarily true in science fiction, because like a lot of really heavy chemical and physics terms have to be explained. I'm not even explaining this well. They have to be explained in order for you to understand the plot. And I don't like that. It's so info dumpy, but it's not info dumpy, but it is info dumpy. No, I stand by that. It's info dumpy and I don't like it. And also, I'm just not the person that looks at space and goes, I want to go there. Like, I remember being 7 years old and being in first grade, and we learned about astronauts, and my teacher was like, which one of you wants to be an astronaut? And I literally sat on my hands because I was like, no, wait, not even accidentally do I want people to think that I want to go into space. There has never been a part of me that's like, I want to be an astronaut. Like, I don't understand why you would purposely go somewhere where you can't breathe easily. Like, I don't know why you would do that. I have no desire to do that. I don't have any real desire to read books about that. This is going to get real ironic in a minute. Hold for that. So I don't think that Artemis is a bad book. I think that my reactions to it have told me a lot about me as a person. So, like, my complaints are mostly for the genre, not so much for the book. My only complaint about this book is I felt weird reading about a man writing about a woman and her sex life. Because there is a character who is constantly harassing this woman about testing out a new condom that he has created on the moon. And every time he sees her, he harasses her. And I took it as harassment. Other people might not have, but I felt weird reading a book about a man describing a woman's sex life. And that has never, ever been a problem for me before in reading. But for some reason in this book, I was like, ooh, I don't like that. That's weird. And, like, nothing happens in this book. There is one kiss scene. There's no smut. There's a fair bit of cursey words, so heads up for that. I don't know. I would give this book 2 stars, and I would not be reading this book again. I don't let's put this scenario out there. If I knew that I could only take 10 books off of my shelves and I had to be running and leaving and I would never come back to my bookshelves ever again, no part of me would be like, maybe I'll take Artemis. That's not where we're going. I'm also not taking this book out into the streets and burning it because I think it's bad and evil. I don't even think it's an offense to art. It's just not for me. So which makes the next part of this very ironic because we're going to talk about the books that I'm going to be moving into now. And I actually have picked up The Martian by Andy Weir, his first book, because I finished Artemis and then read the first chapter of The Martian and went, oh, I actually am really interested and intrigued by this idea. So now I'm reading another space novel, and I'm 2 chapters? I think I'm 3 chapters into The Martian. And it's been a vastly different experience. It's still set in space, though. It's still the beginning stages. So I guess we'll see. I think The Martian is probably my last chance at reading science fiction, because as a genre, I don't know that I love anything where aliens can pop up. And it's not even that aliens are popping up. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about space stuff that I don't like. I'm gonna have to think harder about that. I will pay attention as I read The Martian. But The Martian is set up. There are several things about The Martian that make it feel different, which may not actually be different. The first is I have watched the movie many, many times, so I know the plot, which might help, because then when we come across the science fiction or the explanations of how the sciencey stuff works, I'm already familiar with what's going to happen because of the movie. Maybe. Number 2, this is written as a journal or a diary, and it's very quick, it's very snippy, it's very snappy, and I really like that. It's a great format. So I think those 2 things will make me appreciate The Martian more than Artemis. And like I said, I don't think Artemis is a bad book. And if you like science fiction, it's probably a book that you would really like. But we're not talking about Artemis. We're talking about The Martian. So I'm gonna read The Martian because my husband loves The Martian. He loves everything that he's read by Andy Weir, which is 2 things now at this point. And we both love the movie. So I'm gonna read it. And I'm gonna read it to the end. And if I hate this experience, then I'm probably not picking up science fiction again, because I will have learned my lesson about how much I like this genre. And I'm going to pay attention as I read to see, okay, what is it that I don't like that's happening in this moment, to see if I can point to or pinprick or touch the moments that I hate and figure out what it is specifically about this genre that I don't like. The other book that I'm working my way through right now is The Ravens by Danielle Page. I'm 50% through this, and I'm on the fence about this one. When I first picked it up, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need right now. This is the book that I've been waiting for. It's very well written. We have 2 characters who deeply dislike each other, but I really like both of them. And I don't know how it's going to resolve, and I think the author's doing fantastic things with we're watching both of them in third person go back and forth, and they're having fights and things aren't going well, and then they are going well, and the author's doing a fantastic job not making it dramatic but making it believable, and they're well-rounded characters. So I love every piece of that. It is also a story about a sorority of witches, and I don't remember, Westerly I think is the college, and I'm not sure if it's a real college or not, but the main premise is that we have this girl Vivi, and she goes to Westerly, and she finds out that the sorority house on campus is full of witches, and they accept her to be a witch. And there's a lot of witchy vibes, there's a lot of tarot, all of that is just really fun and really engaging and really interesting. It did a lot of, like, at the beginning it did a lot of things very similar to the Raven Boys, like the feel of the world is very similar to the Raven Boy series by Maggie Stiefvater. So if you really liked that series, you might also like this one. And then my love of it, it's not that it's not gone down, but it's kind of plateaued, and I'm not sure why, because I love getting into a world and being like, all right, the magic system, how does the magic system work? And then the more I learn about the magic system, the less interested I become in the book. And I don't know, that's just something recent that I've discovered in reading about books, and like, the characters draw me through books more than the magic system. And I don't know if that's because I've read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, and so when the magic system is lacking, I'm like, oh, but you have so much potential here. And the magic system here is kind of a side plot almost, like they can use magic to solve any problem at any point. There's just a spell for that, and most of the problems revolve around things that the characters are facing, which is fine. But I can see a potential for a problem, and then the magic solves that problem, and I'm going to really hate that. So I really hope that the author is smart enough not to do that. I'm 50% of the way through the novel. I think I already said that. But I do plan on finishing it, but I'm not finishing it as fast as I thought I was initially. I listened to the first 25% of it really quickly, and then the last 25% has been much slower because I haven't been as interested, and so I haven't picked it up as much. But we'll see. It's definitely gotten super interesting. The main character and her boyfriend broke up at the 50% mark, which is good because they needed to break up. And I'm really interested to see where that's going. I'm really interested in the characters, and now I'm blabbering. So I'm working on that book. I haven't picked up Peril at all by Bob Woodward, mostly because the book that I'm looking at my phone. I'm not just staring down at my cat. But where was I going with this? Oh, Martian Chuzzlewitt by Charles Dickens. I have picked that up a couple times with the audiobook, and when I'm listening to it, I am only listening to it. And here's my confession with Charles Dickens, is that I sometimes really struggle with insomnia, and Charles Dickens puts me to sleep like no one else. And that's not it's not an insult. It's not necessarily a compliment either. I just know that at 1 a.m. when I wake up, I always have a Charles Dickens novel that's just ready to go in Libby. And so I turn it on, and I can set a 10-minute timer, and I know that in 10 minutes I'm going to be passed out, which makes it very hard to read this book because I have listened to the first chapter 4 times now, and I have fallen asleep somewhere in the middle of that chapter every time. So the first 5 minutes of that chapter I know really well, and probably the last 5 minutes of the chapter I know really well. But because I haven't sat down and read through the whole thing in one shot, I know I'm missing pieces because I keep sleeping through it. And so when I do sit down to read it, I'm gonna have to start with chapter 1, but I'm already really familiar with it, so then I'm annoyed. I'm creating problems for myself. But also, the other part of me is like, I just really want to sleep. And if something is going to put me to sleep every time, then I'm going to do it. Anyway, so not much progress on Martian Chuzzlewitt. And then I have 5 classics that I've been considering reading and picking up since I finished Agnes Grey. And I finally settled on one last night, mostly because Emma from Emmy Reads has decided to do a read-along of 100 Years of Solitude. Oh goodness, who's it by? By Gabriel. Right here. I'll know the name next time we check in. I literally only picked this book up last night and read the first 3/4 of the first chapter. The chapters are pretty long in this book. I love this book so far, which is not saying much because I'm 11, 12 pages in. It's got, at the moment, it feels like Strange the Dreamer. I'm very invested in the main character, and I don't know why, because 3 pages in I was like, I'm really interested in this character and to find out what happens to him. And I don't know why, and it's really impressive that the author has done that. And I think it's because the character is so, like, he moves. Like, he is so action-oriented that it's fun to read about him. And I know I said I was going to pick up Don Quixote, and I'm going to. The problem with books, though, is that every time somebody announces a new read-along, I'm like, ooh, shiny new toy, ooh, shiny new toy, ooh, shiny new toy. And I cannot read all the books for all the classic readathons. Like, there's a Jane Austen read-along every July where they read a Jane Austen book, and I just cannot do all of the things. I need to read classics faster. I need to enjoy classics. Anyway, so at the moment, my next plan is to continue reading 100 Years of Solitude with Emmy, and I'm excited to see what she thinks of it. I'm excited to read it with her and annotate it. She said it's one of her favorite books of all time, which I'm really excited for. And I also was thinking about it, and I don't know if we actually have similar reading tastes or not, because typically when it comes to contemporary books, I like the books that she doesn't, which is funny. So when it comes to classics, and she really likes Dickens, and I really like Tolstoy, and so this will be a good judge of how our tastes line up, I guess, because I haven't really thought about that. I love her videos, though. We just probably have different tastes in reading. Maybe. We'll find out. So, okay, so we have 100 Years of Solitude. That's the classic that we'll be working on for the rest of the month. We have The Ravens, and then we have The Martian. So between those 3, that should keep me plenty busy. It's also July 15th. We finished 2 books, and it's fine. I just have been doing lots of other things. I have much more of a social life now. I have a work life now. We're in a much better place than in the middle of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, so I'm not reading as much, which is good for my mental health, but also I'm not reading as much, which makes me sad. So, okay, that's all we have for this check-in. I'll check in with you in like 3 seconds from now. So, bye-bye. Hello. We're gonna film the rest of the wrap-up for July at the end of July. I meant to film this, over the course of the month. And then all of a sudden it's the end of July. But here we are. Alright, so update. I have officially finished The Ravens. I finished it a while ago. The Ravens by Danielle Page and Cass Morgan. And I really liked this. I gave this a 3.5, 4 stars. The writing was really good. The plot was really good. I got a little bored of the magic system, and then I got interested again when it all kind of came together. So I was okay with that. I think my biggest complaints about this book were things like sideline things that I think maybe I'm too much of an adult now because I'm questioning these things. But for example, in the story, one of the girls goes missing, and so they don't involve the police, which, like, great, there's a good magical alibi for why we would not want to involve the police with that. But they also have, like, it's a sorority of witches, okay? And then as they leave and graduate college, they just leave. So, like, why do we not call on an entire army of witches who have left the sorority to come and help figure that out? And then it's not really explained what the end goal here is, what happens after college, which I guess is not a flaw of the novel, but it was some world building that I really wanted to have, because college is not the end-all be-all of life, even though it feels like it when you're there. And so it was like, we have all of these witches who are totally chill with being in this sorority and this, like, really cool coven, and then they leave and they're no longer part of the coven anymore. Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So in terms of the novel itself, it's great, but I think there were some pieces that were missing from the world building that could have been expanded. Did it decrease my enjoyment of the novel overall? A little bit, but mostly because I was like, you have all of these resources that you're just not tapping into. So that feels like a flaw. But overall, this is a really good YA. I think it's Danielle Page. She wrote Dorothy Must Die, which is a spin-off of The Wizard of Oz, and I loved The Wizard of Oz, the movie, growing up. So I think I definitely want to pick that up by her. And I would pick up the second book. I think it's The Monarchs is the second book in the series, and I don't know if that's the end of, if it's just a duology or if there are more books, but I would pick up The Monarchs. However, it's not available at my library, so I'm gonna actually have to like physically put it on hold at a library, which is not that hard. It's really not, but I have yet to do it. But I am interested in these characters, and I would like to find out what happens to them. So that's it for book number 3. The next book I finished is Peril by Bob Woodward. This is the third book in the Trump trilogy that he's written, and this one I felt like was really, really good up till about the 60-70% mark, and then it kind of went into Biden's first 100 days, which I guess that's fair. But at the same time, it was really boring. Like, I picked up this book to discuss the back and forth between Trump and Biden, and so when we just focused on Biden's first 100 days in the presidency, I was like, okay, but there's no drama here. Which is what I'm here for, is the drama. So it did end going back and forth with the themes that he had brought up in the book. But overall, I would say this was probably the least strong out of the 3 books that he's written. I think the other 2 books were much stronger. This one just didn't feel quite as fully thought out, fleshed out as the other 2. I gave this 3 stars. I lost a lot of momentum after the 75% mark. And I don't know if that's just me or if that was... No, I don't think it was me. I think it was that the subject matter was not what I'd been billed, and so it felt really random. And while it was interesting, that wasn't what I was there for while I was reading the book. But the first half was really strong, and the last half was just not that strong. So if you're going to read it, maybe read the first half, and then you can ignore the last half. That's a definite possibility. The next book that I finished is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, and this is a book that I have already read before. I read this, 2018, 4 years ago. I listened to it when I was working, and I really liked it then, and I did not like it as much at all this time around. So the first time I listened to it, I think I gave it 5 stars, but the caveat to that is that I was also just coming back, like I was just getting back into reading. I hadn't read a whole lot of self-help at that point, and so I think my standards were a lot lower, maybe is what we'll say. And I have heard so many good things about Brene Brown, and I remember reading this book and thinking, this is just great, I love this. But this book, I don't know, it just didn't do it for me. I gave this 2 stars, I think, and I have a couple reasons for that. I thought the information was really good. I thought it was well researched. I just didn't like the way it was presented. Like, that's, I think, my biggest complaint about this is the presentation of the work. And that's for a couple reasons. So reason number 1 is there is a lot of fat shaming in this book, but then she also has a lot of commentary on, like, don't let society tell you how your body needs to look. And it was a very paddleboard, like toss you away, to pull you back, to smack you, kind of a deal, because she spent a lot of her examples about her bad examples had to do with your body being overweight, or eating too much, or just negativity around body and food. But then in like the next paragraph or the next breath, she would have examples about how society is selling us things and they're advertising things to us about how our body should look and how our body should feel. And I was like, you can't play it both ways. You cannot walk down the middle of that road. You gotta pick one or the other. So it felt very contradictory, and I didn't appreciate that. The next one is she came across as a little bit whiny as a researcher, because she was talking about how she didn't want the research to be true. Like, she would discover the research and then she would cry about it. She would discover more research and then she would cry about it. And I truly believe that that's like could be the scenario. And I've watched the TED Talk, and it comes across as much more authentic in the TED Talk. But for some reason in the book, it comes across as a little whiny and immature. and annoying. And I don't know if that was just because I was like, get to the point, like, we are 3 chapters into this, like, let's stop saying the same story over and over again. That was frustrating. And then I think my final point is that this is a research-based novel, and I was expecting it to be a little more scientific in the presentation, just in the sense that she talked a lot about having spirituality and religion, but all of the examples she gave were from Christianity. And I personally, like, I am a Christian myself, but I know a lot of people who aren't Christian or who are agnostic who could still benefit a lot from this same science. And by only giving examples of religion in that one sphere, it makes it very hard for people outside of Christianity to look at that and say, oh, I understand like what principles you're teaching and how that can be applied across the spectrum. Because she did say spirituality of any kind. But the examples that she all gave were all very based on Christianity. And I guess I'm more used to my science being explained in a way that is more approachable by more people. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Like, I think when it comes to talking about principles that are common to the entire human existence, we should probably pull back and talk about religion in a more neutral term. Because there is a time and a place to talk about religion and your religious feelings, and then there is also a time and place to talk about the human experience. These two things don't have to be black and white. They can coexist and overlap, but it was done in a way that made it very obvious that this is all in this camp. This is all in the Christianity camp, which I personally don't care about, but I know other people do. And so I was really surprised at how straight down the line towards Christianity this pointed, because I feel like for being a researcher of the human experience, she would know better than to just pigeonhole everything into Christianity. I do think there were a lot of things that were really valuable that were covered in this, but it just wasn't done in a way that highlighted the research really well. So, for example, I'll read you some of my notes. She talked about how you can't selectively numb your emotions, which might have been astonishing in 2010, but I feel like that's pretty common knowledge now, so that's really not all that interesting. I mean, she had a whole conversation about when we, like, this is one of her quotes, when we struggle to believe in our worthiness, we hustle for it. So talking about perfectionism. I thought the chapter on play was the most interesting, which was point 11 or 9 or something like that. But most of what she said was, I read this book and did these things. And so I feel like it'd be more beneficial to actually read the book that she recommended, which was Play by Dr. Stuart Brown. And I thought, like, I don't know, she had this small little chapter on it, but I didn't feel like it was beneficial to have that novel in there. I don't know, because she just didn't go into depth enough about anything to make it worth it to have even had the discussion. So I'm torn, because there was a lot of really good information here. Didn't like the presentation. A lot of the information was repeated very highly over and over again. And I also could get that information in other ways from things that are maybe that have a better presentation. So I don't know, 2 stars. I'm probably not going to read this again. I would try another Brene Brown book because I've heard that the other books are better from people who have read this one and who have read her other ones. But this was not it for me. Okay, and the last book that I have finished this month is Night of the Ice, and I'm going to totally butcher this name, by Yaoi Ogawa. This is the first manga novel that I have fully read all the way through. And I don't know what I think of this. I finished this last night, so I wanted to pick up some manga because I've been watching a lot of videos from Katie Coulson and A Clockwork Reader, and they really love some manga books. And they had a couple recommendations, and I went to my library, and most of the recommendations that they had weren't there, so I'm gonna have to put them on hold. So I picked up a couple books that were just the first in the series, and I just grabbed a bunch of first books, and I have a bunch sitting on my shelf right here that I'm gonna start on and work on. And I don't know. I don't want to be a snob and say that I don't think this is an actual book because it has lots of pictures. Because children's books I consider to be books, and they have lots of pictures. But for some reason, when we add the comic book element to it, it makes me, I'm like, why am I reading this? And it's also backwards, and like you read it backwards. And so this is just my first introduction to manga in general, and I don't think this was a great one to start with. I haven't seen a whole lot of people review this. Sorry, my cat is chasing her tail. Anyway, this is the story about Kokoto, I think is his name, and these are all Japanese names, and I'm going to butcher them very, very badly. And he is a competitive figure skater, and I loved all the imagery of the ice. I thought all of that was really well done. I spent a lot of time watching figure skaters. I love figure skating, and all of it the artwork was gorgeous. Anyway, he's a competitive figure skater, but he only does really well when his childhood friend performs a spell on him, and then he performs perfectly. And so his managers all know this, and so her work life is starting to suffer because she has to show up to all of his competitions. Why they don't put her on the payroll, I don't know. The overall story of this was less than stunning and impressive, but I don't know if I think that because I'm expecting the whole thing to wrap up in the entire first book, because it didn't. And I know that this is 8 or 9 episodes, versions. What is the correct word I'm looking for? 8 or 9 books. And so I don't think it's correct to assume that it's just going to wrap everything up in book one. Book one is supposed to just introduce the world, which I think it did. I just am not interested in this story, so I don't think I'll be finishing this one. And I think I need to pick up something like Yona of the Dawn, or I think there's one by Neil Gaiman, The Sandman. I think it's manga. I don't know. Or The Kitchen Witch, or things that are maybe have a wider popularity, and see if I'll try a couple of those. I don't know if manga is for me, but like I said, this is only the first one I've ever read, and I really like the idea of it. So I'm gonna try a couple and see if I can get used to it, because I do have to get used to the fact that I'm reading comics. They're not comics, but comic-like style, where you're looking at pictures and words. I have to get used to that. How far are we? I am on page 302 of The Martian. I am thoroughly enjoying this. I think it's because I've watched the movie, and so I know where it's going and what it's doing. I still am not going to say that this is my favorite book. I am highly, highly enjoying it, but I don't think I'm going to pick up science fiction on purpose. I think I know enough about myself and my reading taste now to officially say I don't love this. And the other thing is 100 Years of Solitude. Oh, are you going to walk in front of the camera? Oh, you are. Hello. Silly goose. All right, bum off the camera. Thank you. The last book, thank you. Come here. Let me just hold you. The last book is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I'm cheating, I have it right here. And I am halfway through this novel. I think this is beautifully written. I don't know that I would say that it's my favorite novel by any stretch of the imagination. There's so much incest. And it's not like it's not like it builds up to the incest, it's all of a sudden just there. You just start reading through the sentences and there you go. Everyone is having incest with their family members. And I feel like I'm not smart enough to be reading this book because there's so many things that are happening here, and I'm like, I feel like this is really significant. And I don't know why. And I don't know if that's because I'm picking up on foreshadowing and I'm missing it. I don't know. So part of me is wondering if I just need to think deeper about what I'm reading. I definitely need to study more about the chapters, because I'm far enough in that all of the Aurelianos and Jose Arcadios are starting to blend together, and I have to mentally work my way through how many Aurelianos we've been through and which one this is most likely to be. And I think that's done on purpose. I think you're not supposed to always know which character, they're supposed to blend together a little bit. But I want to know. So I need to do more research on that one. I am enjoying it, and I'm definitely going to finish it. Will I pick up other things with magical realism? Probably, but I think it will help going into it knowing that I may not initially like that. I think that'll be good to know. But that's where we're at for the month of July. Today is July 30th. If I finish something, it would be The Martian. So we're gonna call that a wrap for the month of July. So that was all down to the books.